Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of 365 Days of Gaming. I appreciate you taking out time to check out this video. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Greatly appreciate it, so thank you in advance. Now, today's game is going to represent a certain time. Always during the summer, I was always going to some sort of camp, whether it was for scouts or other different groups. And I always needed me a handheld, even though I was advised not to bring one. So I wanted to show you a game that represents that time. And this is Bart Escape from Camp Deadly for the Game Boy. Now, it took me a minute to find this game, not because it's a hard to find game, but because I kept calling it Escape from Camp Krusty. Because if you watch Simpsons, Camp Krusty was a thing, and there was a whole Escape from Camp Krusty episode, or sort of a Lord of the Flies situation going on. So I kept always thinking this game was called that, but it's not. It's called Bart's Escape from Camp Deadly. So you go to camp, as kids are wont to do, and there's some Mr. Burns version of the camp counselor, like this evil version. It clearly tells you that they're evil. And essentially you play Bart trying to go through each of the activities while trying to stay alive. It's a very simple game, right? It's just a platformer, little action adventure elements. You got weapons and different items and stuff you can collect. But the game is like one of those, you have to know what's going to happen before, for the most part, until you get like really comfortable. So in the beginning, you have to like get these flags. Well, it's kind of easy in theory, but what you have to start doing is, your base spitball doesn't actually kill enemies. It only freezes them. So you have to make sure you have the boomerang. You can actually run out of boomerangs if you don't catch them. Then there's some platforming you got to do, and the game doesn't tell you anything about the platforming. Back in the day, it was just, teach you by doing. So you get to certain parts and you're like, what do I do next? For example, you have these bees that show up and you're like, what am I supposed to do? Well, I died several times trying to figure out what I was supposed to do at this part until I realized you were supposed to climb up the tree and jump over them. That's the stuff that the game wants you to kind of figure out. And that was kind of par for the course for our adventure games back in the day on the Game Boys, because, they weren't quite what we have now from the portables, where they're basically, a console in itself. These, it was really good. But then also this wasn't a, first party game either. But I always really enjoyed this game because it takes a long time to like figure out what you have to do every time I played it. And so there's going to be a lot of trial and error, but then you get to a next part that you haven't been to in a while and you're like, oh, okay, I'm starting to feel it again. I only remember ever beating this game once, and it took a lot of work because you have to basically have a perfect run. There is no real room for error if you're going to get through this whole game. So you start outside and then you get into like this little lunch area. So it's like food fights, but you can't throw food while you're around any of the adults. So you get in trouble. But the game was really fun. It was very easy to play. It was always one of those games like me and my cousin would we pass back and forth trying to see who can get further and stuff like that. So it was a very useful game because you need something when you're out there, at those camps in the woods and things like that. So I always wanted to kind of, use a game to demonstrate that time that would happen like every summer for at least like a decade in my life. There was like every summer was you were going to something for a couple of weeks or something like that, whether it was a camp or some sort of, version of camp. And, I had to sneak a handheld in there. I just couldn't do right. So if I was going to, show you a game that kind of represented that, there's going to be some other camp games, but this one is definitely, high on my replay list because it was just very easy. Plus it was a Game Boy game, which means that I could play it on the Game Boy Color, and also when I got my Game Boy Advance, you could play them on there as well. So it was a very useful device. I mean, a very useful game. It was a multi-generational. If you remember this game and you played it and you know what I'm talking about, let me know your thoughts on this one. If you have some other summer camp games that you would like to, maybe see, or maybe we have some similar interests in those type of games, let me know what kind of handhelds you were taking with you to camp. What games were some of your best memories on the way there, during, or on the way back? As always, I appreciate you taking out time to let me reminisce with you. Y'all have fun. Y'all be safe. Peace.